Out of all the games that probably will win Game of the Year, Kirby and the Forgotten Land won't be one of them. But this isn't to say it's bad. Kirby as a franchise has always been a 2D platforming franchise since the late 80s, early 90s, with some spin-offs here and there. But when it comes to the jump to 3D, it hasn't really got one besides Kirby 64, and Air Ride was just a spin-off from my understanding. But with this generation of hardware, Nintendo did some experimenting to make their franchises up to date in the modern era, and most of them doing financially well. Kirby, on the other hand, just had Star Allies and a few cheap eShop titles that mean nothing. Click the card on the right if you want to hear my thoughts on Star Allies. But on a Nintendo Direct of September 2021, they announced a game that would say that Kirby wants to go to 3D with Forgotten Land and released on March 25th, 2022 with great reception. When playing this game, I think that this game is beyond overrated in terms of gameplay and how the team put it together. And like I said, this is the team's first 3D Kirby game, and it's not perfect and definitely needs improvements. This is the myth, the legend, Squidward 5, and this is my gaming essay on Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And should it be Game of the Year? Not. The stories for Kirby are usually consistent by how they're simple yet have larger than life threats to make the journey worthwhile. It starts with Kirby enjoying another day in Dreamland until a massive storm cloud came by and all of Dreamland into this abandoned landscape, which is a city and other areas. After exploring for a while, you meet this flying turquoise rat, and you decided to be friends with it, and the adventure begins to uncover the mysteries of this abandoned kingdom of shit. For Kirby standards, it's normal, with how everything is laid out, and when you get to the end, it changes the course and tries to give you reasons for everything while being more threatening and having life at stake. And you also have some other stuff once the game is done, but during the writing of this review, I didn't play the post-games content yet. The core of a Kirby plot is still there with many notable characters returning as bosses, such as King Dedede and Mennonite. He should date the Count, while also having some new faces to keep it somewhat interesting. But there's no real character development in the game at all. That rat, I'm not calling it by its official name, is mostly just there without any reason until the final act, which I won't spoil here. So overall, the story is technically up to standards for a Kirby game, but some of the character development is pretty weak, which is understandable since the gameplay should carry this game. Hopefully. Let's talk about the gameplay since the majority of the game is that. Let's start off with the basics of how the game is structured. It's usually a start to finish level design for the main levels. Your goal is to get as much Waddle Dees in each level, and there's usually several to collect, around less than 12 per stage from my understanding. You get them by doing basic platforming challenges, doing a task like taking down posters, or getting ducks to their mother, using copy abilities and the stage's main gimmick. And also at the end, you get 3, which also counts. The copy ability I just mentioned have returned, because it's literally a part of Kirby's core gameplay. You have your standards like sword, bombs, fire, ice, and a yellow hat color. But you have a few new ones like the ranger or a gun, a driller, and the one where you are a spike ball. The game itself also introduces a new version of them called mouthful mode, in which you inhale objects like a car, a tire, or even a refrigerator to do puzzles and do some interesting mission types. As for the stages themselves, it's in a third-person perspective and have very similar gameplay to Mario 3D World, but make it more in line with the Kirby franchise. Once you're done with the stage, you will be headed back to this world map for the levels. The game contains around 7 worlds, with each having 3 to 5 levels, a boss battle, and these trial modes. These trial stuff is mostly using the already mentioned mouthful mode and copy abilities and using them as platforming challenges. And you'll be given around 3 minutes to complete the stages, which for the most part is enough to get through them. And at the end, you'll be given these rare stars, which their purpose will be shared in a minute. For the boss stages, the character designs feel too real and not really Kirby. You have a gorilla, leopard, this armadillo guy that feels too generic and out of place in terms of design. You also have the return of King Dedede, in which he is completely different in terms of design and a mix of old and new mini bosses that work. I won't go into any details on anything after the second Dedede fight because it's endgame and I won't spoil. Once you're done with the world or just want a break from the action, you can take a trip to Waddle Dee Town, which is new to the Kirby franchise and the game's hub world. It's filled with many things to see and do, including the ability to upgrade copy abilities, in which you find blueprints for the abilities in the levels and use an abundance of coins and rare stars I mentioned. It's also home to an arena in which you can take part in these trials to defeat a number of bosses and go against Meta Knight, and you would receive his blueprint for his copy ability, which is neat, and I could say this is the highlight of the game for me. Other things you can do include buy items at this shop later on in the game, eat specialty food at this restaurant, which also houses a mini game by how you feed the Waddle Dees the correct food while doing it fast. You can also go fishing, play this other game, see in-game cutscenes, and you can earn these capsules through the game and in these machines that contain a little toy about every asset of the game. And that's not all, because there's also post-game content I haven't even mentioned. I didn't get to it in this review because of time, along with getting all of the Waddle Dees and rare stars in the 7 worlds. On paper, this game has a lot of content and it can help make the experience more interesting, which is a good plus to have in a game. But why I think this game is overrated is all thanks to how, for me, it did not blow me away. What I'm saying is that when I'm playing this game, it feels like just another game with Kirby characters and design thrown into it to make people interested. If this is going to be Game of the Year, it needs something that would innovate the style of gameplay or try to be the best platformer. For what the game has, it's good to okay. And I also know that this is the first real 3D Kirby game. But for me, that's not enough for a game to be considered Game of the Year. Hope by the next 3D Kirby game, they can try to make a gimmick that could change how we see platformers, but that's just a thought. Another reason could be that I mostly played the game very late at night, and I was too tired to play, but I'm not sure. As a whole, the gameplay delivers on a core 3D experience and is up to standard for a big studio 3D platformer. But why I think that it's not Game of the Year standard is because the gameplay doesn't do anything that really makes it noteworthy other than the fact that it's the first real 3D mainline Kirby game. Kirby is more animated and has more of a colorful color palette, which will help make the visual design appealing to everyone. This game, however, wants to feel very generic. If you remove the Kirby assets, you have a standard looking platformer. It's just that past installments, they made the visuals colorful and usually a place you want to be at. But instead, it's an abandoned city with many basic assets, which I'm gonna say is fine, since this is the style of game they want to be for this title. Character designs have usually stayed the same, but with a few differences. The boss characters, while generic, also make sense here due to them fitting the overall theme of the game. As graphics, it's above standard, and HAL Laboratories did the best they could in making them pleasant to look at, even if the topic may be a little dark and how abandoned everything is. Performance wasn't really an issue here. I remember it running pretty smoothly and it worked well for the type of game it is, and the soundtrack is okay. It will never reach the level that Star Allies have, but they do have some good stuff like the mall theme and maybe the earlier levels. Even though these type of visuals won't work for a Kirby game, the game and the context of the plot makes them work here. Everything else just works as well. As a game, Kirby and the Forgotten Land is an alright platforming game, but for me, it's super overhyped and doesn't deserve to be in the Game of the Year talks, even though this is the only 2022 game I've played thus far. If you find this game to be fantastic, then that's completely okay since everybody experienced games differently. For me, the game did not impress, even though in Kirby standards, this game is technically the first 3D Kirby game. The plot is standard for Kirby, but it's non-existent until the end, and this thing does nothing for the entire game. While the gameplay has a lot of variety, it's still a very standard 3D platforming game that does nothing to impress, and the presentation is just fine. It does its job even though it looks weird for a Kirby game, but in context it makes a whole lot of sense. So in total, the game does not, in my opinion, deserve to be in the Game of the Year discussion. If I were to give the game a score, I say it's a 6.8 out of 10. It's decent, but I wasn't impressed with what the game had to offer. besides the mall theme and the Mennonite Cup, which were pretty good / great. I'll admit that.
It's a wonderful day to go out and play. Hey, maybe you could come along. All you need to bring is a song to sing, a happy little baby song.